A plane disappears from radar. Within hours, before a single piece of wreckage has been found, before any investigator has said a word, you already have a theory. Somebody did this on purpose. Somebody knows more than they are saying. Your mind built an entire explanation before the facts existed. That is not a character flaw. It is not a sign that you are gullible or careless with evidence. It is what a healthy brain does when it meets a gap in knowledge that feels too large and too threatening to leave open. People assume that belief in a conspiracy theory means someone is foolish, uneducated, or simply bad at thinking. But that explanation does not hold up. Intelligent, careful, well-informed people fall into conspiracy thinking constantly because the pull toward it does not come from a failure of intelligence. It comes from the same equipment that lets you catch a ball without doing the physics, recognize a face in a crowded room, or sense that someone is angry before they say a single word. That equipment is built to find patterns and to find agents behind those patterns fast with incomplete information. Most of the time it serves you well. Sometimes it produces a conspiracy theory instead. Start with the pattern-finding part. Your mind did not evolve to be accurate above all else. It evolved to be fast enough to keep you alive. Imagine an ancestor hearing a rustle in the grass. There are two possible mistakes. Assume it is the wind when it is actually a predator, and you may not survive to make a second mistake. Assume it is a predator when it is actually the wind, and you waste a moment of attention and nothing more. Given that asymmetry, a mind that leans towards seeing danger, seeing intention, seeing a pattern even when none exists, will outlive a mind that stays neutral until it has enough evidence. The psychologist Michael Shermer gave this tendency a name: Patternicity, the inclination to find meaningful patterns in both meaningful and meaningless noise. He paired it with a second tendency he called agenticity, the inclination to believe that those patterns are the product of intentional agents rather than chance. Put the two together, and you get a mind that is primed, by default, to look at a confusing event and conclude that someone did it on purpose. This connects to something called proportionality bias. When something enormous happens, a plane vanishes, a president is killed, a pandemic reshapes the world, it feels wrong for the cause to be small, mundane, or accidental. A big effect seems to demand a big, deliberate cause. A single unstable pilot, a lone gunman, a virus that jumped species by chance. These explanations can feel almost insulting in their smallness compared to the size of what happened. A hidden network, a secret plan, a powerful group pulling the strings, that explanation matches the scale of the event. It is not more accurate, it simply feels more proportionate, and your mind mistakes that feeling of proportion for a feeling of truth. Think about how differently the same event lands depending on the story attached to it. A stock market suddenly drops. If you were told a single automated trading system misfired for 90 seconds, the explanation feels almost too small to justify the fear you already felt watching your savings move. If you were told a coordinated group deliberately triggered the drop to profit from the panic, the explanation finally matches the size of what your body just experienced. Neither version has been checked against evidence yet. You've only heard two sentences. But one of them already feels more true purely because it is proportionate to the emotion already sitting in your chest. There is a further ingredient, and it has been tested directly. In a well-known study, the psychologists Jennifer Whitson and Adam Galinsky asked people to recall a time they felt out of control and showed them images of random visual noise, static with no actual pattern in it. People who had just been reminded of their own lack of control were significantly more likely to see shapes and patterns in the static than people who had not. The same effect showed up when people were asked to evaluate ambiguous, uncertain situations, including judgments involving conspiratorial explanations. Losing a sense of control does not just create discomfort, it measurably increases the rate at which a mind manufactures patterns to compensate. A conspiracy theory offers exactly that kind of compensation. It replaces a frightening, formless uncertainty. Nobody knows why this happened, with a structured, if false, certainty. Somebody knows, and it was planned. Once that explanation takes hold, a second mechanism keeps it in place. Confirmation bias means you notice and remember the details that support what you already suspect, and you skim past or explain away the details that don't. A coincidence becomes evidence. A denial becomes proof of a cover-up, since of course they would deny it. An absence of evidence becomes evidence of how well hidden the conspiracy must be. Each of these moves feels from the inside like careful thinking. It is actually the mind protecting a conclusion it reached quickly for emotional reasons, long before it gathered any evidence at all. This is where the psychological explanation needs a philosophical partner, because there is a question underneath all of this that psychology alone cannot answer. What actually makes a belief justified? A conspiracy theory can feel completely coherent. Every piece seems to fit. Nothing appears to contradict it, because contradictions get reinterpreted as confirmations. But coherence is not the same thing as truth. A story can be internally consistent and still be entirely disconnected from what actually happened. The philosopher Karl Popper spent considerable effort examining this exact problem when he studied what he called the conspiracy theory of society. The belief that major events are almost always the deliberate result of powerful people acting in secret. Popper's central objection was not that conspiracies never happen. Real conspiracies do happen. His objection was that a properly scientific or rational explanation has to be falsifiable. It has to be possible, in principle, for evidence to prove it wrong. A conspiracy theory, by contrast, is often built so that no possible evidence could ever count against it. Silence confirms it. Denial confirms it. Contradictory evidence becomes part of the cover-up. A belief immunized against every possible disproof is not a strong belief. It is an unfalsifiable one. And unfalsifiability is a warning sign, not a mark of certainty. There is a related pattern worth understanding, documented decades ago by the psychologist Leon Festinger. He studied a small group who believed a specific date had been set for the end of the world. When the date passed and nothing happened, the group did not abandon the belief. Many of them believed it more strongly, reinterpreting the failure as evidence that their devotion had postponed the disaster. Festinger called the discomfort behind this cognitive dissonance, the tension between a belief you have committed to and evidence that contradicts it. The mind, faced with that tension, often finds it easier to bend the evidence than to release the belief, especially once identity, community, or a sense of having seen the truth has been built on top of it. None of this means people who believe conspiracy theories are broken or unusually irrational. The same researchers who study this describe it as an extension of completely normal cognition operating under difficult conditions, not a separate category of thinking reserved for other people. The psychologist Rob Brotherton has argued that conspiracy thinking is less a rare belief system and more a set of ordinary mental habits: patternicity, agenticity, proportionality bias, confirmation bias, that exist to some degree in every human mind and simply become more visible under the right pressure. And the modern world applies that pressure constantly. You live inside an information environment your ancestors never had to navigate, one filled with genuine uncertainty, real institutional failures, and a constant stream of ambiguous, fast-moving, emotionally charged claims, all amplified by systems specifically built to reward whatever gets the most attention. A calm, well-sourced, uncertain explanation rarely wins that competition. A confident, pattern-rich, agent-driven story usually does, not because it is more accurate, but because it is more shareable. An algorithm has no interest in whether an explanation is true. It has an interest in whether you stop scrolling. And a tidy villain will stop you scrolling far more reliably than an honest sentence like, "Nobody is fully sure yet." Add moments of genuine loss of control, economic instability, a pandemic, a sudden death, a political shock, and you have precisely the conditions under which Whitson and Galinsky's participants started seeing patterns in random noise. You are not seeing patterns because your mind is doing exactly what it evolved to do, in an environment that is unusually good at triggering it, and unusually well built to reward you for sharing the result. So what can you actually do with this? Not never trust a surprising explanation, and not assume every official account is automatically correct, since real conspiracies, real cover-ups, and real institutional failures do exist and deserve scrutiny. The more useful move is smaller and more specific. Notice the feeling itself. When an explanation arrives that feels unusually satisfying, that resolves your uncertainty a little too neatly, that turns a confusing, accidental world into a story with a clear villain and a clear plan, treat that feeling as a signal to slow down, rather than as proof you have found the truth. Ask yourself one direct question before you accept it or share it. What evidence, if it turned up, would change my mind? If you cannot answer that question, if no possible evidence could ever count against the explanation, that is not a sign of how well hidden the truth is. It is a sign that you're looking at a belief built to survive contact with evidence rather than to be tested by it. There is a second, quieter check worth running alongside the first. Ask whether the explanation arrived while you were already anxious, already destabilized, already feeling like events were happening to you rather than around you, with your understanding intact. That is not proof the explanation is false. It's simply useful information about why it feels so convincing right now, in this particular moment, rather than in a calmer one. A belief that only feels certain when you are unsettled deserves a second look once you're not. A plane disappears from radar, and once again, before any evidence exists, your mind is already offering you a story. That story might be true, but the speed and the satisfaction with which it arrived were never evidence of anything. They were simply your mind doing what it has always done, filling a gap in the world with a shape it could live with.